friends, I'm Carrie Jo, and this is Holy Chuckles Podcast, a space where all meets honesty and where God's gentle humor shows up in the people he chooses. So pull up a seat, take a breath, and let's look together for the sacred in the everyday and the quiet laughter of a God who delights in working through our imperfect stories. In 1 Samuel 2:16 and 17, we heard God speak with clarity, naming coercion, pressure, and inner self-sabotage for what they are. Those verses showed us that God does not agree with anything that overrides what is sacred within us. Now in verse 18 and 19, the tone shifts. After naming what harms, Scripture shows us what heals. But Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. Each year, his mother made him a little robe and took it to him when she went up with her husband to offer the annual sacrifice. Verse 18, but Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. The literal, Samuel is still a child. He is serving in the presence of the Lord. He is not acting like Eli's sons. He wears a linen ephod, a garment associated with priestly service. This verse is deliberately placed in contrast to the corruption described earlier. This verse shows quiet faithfulness, humility, purity of intention, presence rather than power. Remember, symbolically, Samuel represents the inner knowing, the true self, the uncorrupted part of the soul. Symbolically, this verse tells us, even in the middle of unhealthy systems, something pure can grow. Even when inner pressure and self-sabotage exist, your true self is not lost. The soul does not need force to serve God. It needs presence. The linen ephod symbolizes simplicity, authenticity, spiritual identity that is not performative, worth that does not need to prove itself. This verse shows your true self serves God simply by just being present, not striving, not forcing, not controlling. In real life, this verse shows up as moments of quiet alignment, a sense of being grounded without needing to be explained, choosing sincerity over performance, feeling connected without pressure, living from inner truth rather than reaction. It reminds us your worth is not measured by control or urgency. Your spiritual life does not have to be loud to be real. Healing can happen quietly. The truest parts of you often grow unnoticed. This is very true for me. I started this podcast one way, thinking one thing. Then I moved to something else. Then I pivoted. And now here we are. But as I've realized what I'm supposed to be doing, maybe not even realized, let me say it this way. As God told me what I was supposed to be doing, even though I've kind of fought it every step of the way because I wanted to be in control. I'm now on a path that is feeling really good, and I'm in alignment with what God has me doing. I'm co-creating with God. And I started to feel good about everything. And then I wanted to say, but God, I want more people to hear this message. I want more people to be involved. And so I was really stressed and pressed to get little short videos on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook. And let me tell you, if you don't know how much time it takes to make these little short videos, especially at my age where I've got to ask someone younger how to do something, I'm at that point in my life. You know, when I was a kid and I could work the VCR and my parents couldn't, I thought I was pretty awesome and super smart. I'm at that point in my life. I can work the remote. I can work the computer. I can do some things, but when it comes to making these short videos, I've got to go to someone younger. But that was the point. God didn't say, hey, Carrie Joe, I want you to do this podcast and involve everyone and their dog in it. He didn't say, hey, Carrie Joe, I want you to start this podcast and do short TikTok videos or make sure videos are on Facebook. That's not what he said. He said, Carrie Joe, I want you to start this podcast. And I want us to work together and do it my way because God's way is the best way. So I started putting the shorts up. I started focusing on that. And man, was that tiring. Man, was that exhausting. Why? Because it was pressure. It was performance. It was what I thought I was supposed to do because it's what everybody else does. And then God said to me, I didn't create you to be like everyone else. I didn't create you to follow everyone else's pattern. I didn't create you to follow society's pattern. I created you so that way you and I could co-create this podcast together and you could get out this message that I specifically gave to you. I didn't ask you to do the tiki-talk. I didn't ask you to gain 1 million followers. I didn't ask you to try to move faster than what you were ready for. And again, I tried to be in control. All I wanted to do was get God's message out. But I forgot. And then I had to remember God can move mountains. God can do anything. So when God is ready for this message to be out, God will give it. God will make it happen. God will put it in places that I never even thought of, because that's the power of God. So I had to nix my control, even to the point of last night. I was sitting at my computer creating little short videos, and God said, "What are we doing?" And I said, "God, I'm just creating." No, I didn't say, "God, I'm creating." I said, "God, I'm just being creative." And God said, "Really? Do you like making the short videos?" I said, "No, I do not." He said, "Do you like sitting at your computer for 1,000,000 hours?" I said, "No, I do not." God said, "Do you like figuring out how to post these things, what time to post them?" I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Let me ask you another question. Do you like doing the podcast?" And I answered back, "God, I love doing the podcast. It brings me joy. It's a time of worship. It's a time you and I spend together and we talk. And I love doing the podcast." And God said, "Do you mind even doing the editing of the podcast?" And my answer was no. In fact, I like it. That gives me joy, because then I get to go back and I get to relive, remember, understand. And then God said to me, "Do you see the difference? I gave you the podcast because I knew you would love it, because I knew you would excel at it, because I knew the voice you have, the stories you can tell. That's your gift." He said, "But I didn't give you the gift of making short videos, of being on social media, of trying to push something that doesn't need to be pushed." And then God said, "So why do you continue to try to take control?" He said, "You're like Samuel right now. You're learning to worship. You're learning to hear. You're learning to understand." God said, "You've rushed all your life, Carrie Joe, to get somewhere, to be someone. Why are you rushing now? Because you're here. You are someone. You're my child. You are a piece of me. There is nothing else you need to be. There is nowhere else you need to go. There is no other ladder you need to climb. You're here. You've made it. There's nothing else. You've made it. All I want you to do is be my Samuel, is learn to worship. Let me grow inside you. Don't push what doesn't need to be pushed. Don't pull what doesn't need to be pulled. Just sit still, sit quiet, and just let's develop this relationship. And when you're ready, I will tell you what your next steps are. But until then, you're doing exactly what I've called you to do, and that is this podcast. In my life, I've never sat in the quiet this long. And sometimes when you're doing something that you haven't done before, it's uncomfortable. But that's when you know you're doing the work, when it's uncomfortable. Why verse 18 matters. But Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. This verse matters because it shows us that health can exist alongside harm. After verses filled with coercion, pressure, and misuse of power, this verse quietly introduces a contrast. While unhealthy patterns are active, Samuel, the child, is simply present before God. This matters because it tells us corruption does not get the final word. Unhealthy systems do not destroy what is true. Inner self-sabotage does not erase the true self. God's work does not require force or urgency. See, Samuel is not striving. He's not proving anything. He's just simply being. The linen ephod matters as well. It symbolizes simplicity and authenticity, a spiritual identity that is not inflated, performative, or aggressive. Verse 18 reminds us your truest self can remain intact even when other parts of life are chaotic. God is present not only in the moments of confrontation, but also in quiet faithfulness. Growth does not always announce itself. Sometimes it just keeps showing up. Verse 19. Each year, his mother made him a little robe and took it to him when she went up with her husband to offer the annual sacrifice. So Hannah continues to care for Samuel yearly. She makes him a robe, something personal and intentional. Her love and presence are consistent, not dramatic. This happens alongside normal worship rhythms. Literally, this verse shows ongoing nurture, intentional care, faithfulness over time, relationship that does not disappear after sacrifice. Symbolically, Hannah represents the soul that nurtures the true self. This verse symbolically shows the soul continuing to tend what is sacred, worth being reinforced over time, identity being gently clothed and affirmed, love that returns again and again. The robe symbolizes affirmation, protection, identity, emotional and spiritual covering. This verse tells us healing and self-worth are not one-time events. They are sustained through consistent care. The soul does not abandon what it has given to God. It continues to nurture it. In our daily lives, this verse shows up as self-compassion practiced repeatedly, returning to yourself with kindness, honoring your growth year by year, allowing identity to evolve gently, tending your inner life even when no one sees it. This verse reminds us growth is seasonal, worth is reinforced. Your inner life needs tending, not abandoning. Love that is steady heals more than love that is intense. When I talk about Samuel's robe, I had this vision kind of pop into my head, kind of a reminder. In my life, I have been a person that usually you can find me only wearing shorts and t-shirts. Throughout the years, I would wear t-shirts that had sayings. And as I look back on my t-shirts and when I would wear them and the sayings that would be on them, I realized with those t-shirts, I was telling myself as well as the people around me a story, and I didn't even know I was doing that. For a long time, I would wear t-shirts that were crass, rude. They would say different things, and I'm trying to remember. They would say like, "No one cares what you have to say." Or they would have a lot of explicit language on them. Then there was a period in my life where I was wearing t-shirts that had cats on them with like different scenes. So I wasn't being offensive, but I wasn't saying my message. I was just being. Then I switched over to t-shirts that gave a message about rights for oppressed communities. And I wore those for a while. Then I noticed I just wanted plain nothing t-shirts, no saying, no anything. And as I'm going through this relationship with God, through this spiritual awakening, through remembering who I am, I noticed my t-shirts started to change into more positive sayings, more biblical verses, where there is no way in the world I would have wore those out. I wouldn't have even put those on. But now I wear them with pride. I wear them out and about, and I hope that people notice them. So I understood through my t-shirts, I was telling myself the story of where I was kind of going when I was just in the middle of things to now where I am. And I realized that was my robe. That was my ephod. That was my soul, my Hannah, without me even knowing, saying, hey, let me switch you over to this. Let's move this way. That was my Hannah bringing the ephod that she made me every year. That was the Hannah bringing the ephod that she made with care and love and intention. That was the same thing. That was my soul telling my mind, hey, let's make some changes. Let's go where we need to be going because she's remembering who she really is. And now let's match it from the outside. So every day she reads these messages, not those crass, hurtful messages. But now every day she reads messages of love, of intention, of kindness, of care. Because it wasn't just for the people around me, it was also for me. Why verse 19 matters. Each year, his mother made him a little robe and took it to him when she went up with her husband to offer the annual sacrifice. This verse matters because it shows us how healing and identity are sustained over time. Hannah didn't disappear after giving Samuel to God. She continued to return year after year with care that is intentional, personal, and loving. See, with those t-shirts, my Hannah, my soul continued to return to give me little hints, to jog my memory. And my soul, my Hannah, did that intentional, personal, and loving to help me remember who I really am. This verse teaches us growth needs nurture, not abandonment. Worth is reinforced through consistency. Healing is not a single moment, but a rhythm. The soul continues to tend what it has offered. The robe. The robe symbolizes care, affirmation, and protection. It's not flashy. It's not dramatic. It simply fits where Samuel is right now. This verse tells us the soul knows how to keep clothing the true self with care as it grows. God's work in us is often supported through quiet, repeated acts of kindness toward ourselves and toward what is becoming. Both verse 18 and 19 show us something quietly powerful. After scripture names what harms the soul, it immediately turns our attention to what heals it. In the midst of corruption and misuse of power, Samuel stands before God, not striving, not proving. He is simply present. His growth is not loud, but it is steady. And then we are shown how growth is sustained. Hannah returns year after year, bringing a robe made with care and intention. Again, this is not dramatic love. It's faithful love. It's the kind of care that understands that growth happens in seasons. And what is sacred must be tended to consistently. Together, these verses remind us that God does not only call out what damages us, God also protects and nurtures what is whole within us. Healing doesn't always arrive with confrontation. Sometimes it arrives through presence, through consistency, through care that quietly says, you matter. Where in your life do you notice something whole and true continuing to grow quietly? And how might you tend it with gentleness and care rather than pressure? Until next time, may you honor the steady work of healing, trust that quiet growth within you, and care for what is sacred in your own becoming.